Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We are live with probably the guest I've been most excited about for quite a while, former Congressman Justin Amash from the great state of Michigan. You were elected as a Republican, left the GOP over the Trump stuff, became a member of the Libertarian Party, God help us. And then you said, screw this, I'm out of Washington, and now you're back home in Michigan. And is that your kids' art behind you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, from several years ago, but yeah.
I think it's great. I think that stuff is great. So people had a lot of questions for us. One of the reasons you and I got to talking on Twitter is you seem to have the belief that the term blue-pilled, which you've been described as, which I'm sure you don't ascribe to yourself, has a negative connotation. And as someone who's done as much as anyone to promote the use of these expressions, when you have slang reach the vernacular, it loses specificity and people use things in different ways. What is your perception of the term blue pill and red pill?
Well, I assume blue pill is being used to mean someone who doesn't really perceive reality as it is, and a red pilled person perceives reality as it is.
Okay, well that's not so this is my definition of red pill, and I want to know if you agree with me. So being red pilled is the belief that what is presented as fact by the corporate press is in fact a carefully constructed narrative intentionally designed to keep some very unpleasant people in power. Do you think that perception of how our media presents information is accurate?
That it's carefully constructed?
And it's intentionally deceptive, yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can't say that as a generalization for all media, but
sure.
Yeah, I think that it's largely the case.
Okay. Okay, so here are the list of like red pills as people go down the rabbit hole, and you don't want to take the whole bottle because that's when you end up in bad places. Do you think Americans as a whole are being misled systematically?
Yes.
Do you think, that's the first one. Okay. Second red pill. Do you think we've been misled since we were in school, since we were young?
Yes.
Do you think that the people who are doing this are fully aware of what they're doing?
Not all of them, but
okay, so
many
2.5.
Are.
Okay. And the last one is, This is the one I think you're not going to agree with. Given the choice, some of these malevolent actors would prefer us dead over defiant.
Well, if the question is some, yeah, I think some, but okay. I don't think it's a large percentage.
I'm not going to pretend that I have any better understanding of Washington than you. I hate it when people think that. I'm sure you get this a lot on Twitter when people are sitting telling you how Congress really works, and it's like I'm here, like I'm in my office. Is Congress closer to Veep, where basically everyone's running around like chickens with their heads cut off and no one really knows what they're doing, or is it closer to House of Cards? I'm sure it's a mix.
It's closer to House of Cards. It's a mix for sure, but it's closer to House of Cards, but it's definitely less competent than either one.
Okay.
Yeah, like when you watch either one, like you watch Veep, it's in many respects more ridiculous than Veep.
Oh, wow.
And if you watch House of Cards, you see people coming up with plans. They want to get a bill passed and they really care about it. And actually in Congress, generally people do not care as much about legislation and policies as they do in House of Cards. Like when you watch House of Cards, they really care about getting that education bill through. In real life, it's more superficial. Like if they want to get it through, it's because of some other motive. It'll help with their election, and they don't really care about the details. The details don't matter. The point of the legislation is to drive a particular agenda. It's not about writing good legislation.
Yeah, I had a speaker when I was in college, and he made the point that you could have one bill and call it the Farm Fairness Bill, and then just cross that out and call it the Farm Freedom Bill, and have it be one for the Democrats, one for Republicans, and the bills in their contents would be exactly the same, and each would accuse the other of this is an outrage and completely un-American, or this is, you hate the farmers. And so I mean, you were very young when you got to Washington. How soon did you realize this is completely different from what I was expecting?
Well, I mean, I don't think it was completely different from what I was expecting. A big part of the reason I got into politics was because I don't like politicians.
Yeah.
I always believed the system was corrupt, and I got into it to expose it. So, I wasn't expecting all these high-minded people who are trying to do right for the public or anything like that. It ended up being more corrupt and just more agenda-driven than I expected. In other words, and I don't mean agenda. I mean agenda in the negative sense, as in personal ego agenda. And there's not that many. There aren't that many people who care about policies or ideas or a functional system.
In a way, isn't that a good thing? Isn't it better if, there's that C.S. Lewis quote, I'd rather be ruled by people who are corrupt, because if I'm ruled by someone who really wants to oppress me with their clean conscience, they won't ever let me sleep?
Yeah, there's some sense in which, I mean, that's right. I mean, I think most of them are, the policy is secondary.
What made you decide, all right, I've had enough of this. I'm going back home to the lovely state of Michigan to spend more time with my family?
Well, I thought about that years ago. I probably since 2014, 2015, I was starting to feel like Congress was not really a place where you could actually accomplish legislative change. I mean, we don't even amend legislation anymore. There's no amending legislation. It's all handed to you. It's top down. It's very orchestrated. I would say that it's mostly like some kind of entertainment programming for people. It's not really it's not really a representative democracy or anything like that. It's a show that is put on to give you the perception that there is a representative government.
Yeah.
And that's not what's happening. And so several years ago, I had said, I'm probably nearing the end of the line for me where I just want to get out of here. I tried to set things right by founding the House Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
The point of the House Freedom Caucus, which came about around 2015, was to set things right. We were fed up with it. A few of us, especially me, just fed up with the way things were working. And we wanted to break open the system, force them by using leverage in numbers to open up the process, allow people to offer amendments, allow people to offer their ideas. And it wasn't just a conservative thing. I'm a libertarian. There were a lot of conservatives in the group, but it wasn't just a conservative or a libertarian thing. It was to open up the place for everyone. I wanted progressives to be able to offer ideas too. We can then go debate those ideas on the House floor, and we can shoot them down if we don't agree with them. But there's not really a point in having a representative system of government if you can't actually represent people. So let's have a marketplace. Let's have deliberation. And I think that it should be a discovery process. We should discover the outcomes, not have the outcomes dictated to us.
Sorry.
When I saw that wasn't happening, I said, I think I got to get out of here.
Yeah, I gave my college try, but I can see what I'm up against,
Yeah.
and I'm only going to be one vote out of 435 at the end of the day anyway. So we lost him. Oh no, here's you and Thomas
Did you lose
Massie.
me?
No,
Okay.
you're back. You and Thomas Massie were
Okay,
like
yeah.
joined at the hip for a while there. You were very close. You both went your separate ways over the Trump impeachment. Was this something that was a source of contention on a social level with you guys? Did you call him to say that you're going to be against President Trump?
No, I think we understand each other, and we're still good friends. I still message with him all the time and talk to him all the time. So it didn't cause any sort of personal rift or problem.
Here's the other. This is the hardcore question. Do you hate the state?
I don't really hate many things. I don't talk about hating things.
Okay, here, let me phrase it this other way.
Okay.
Okay, this is the Rothbard question.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
If there was a button that if you pressed it, it would end the state, would you press it so fast that you'd get a blister?
Well, you'd have to define state for me. So if you mean the state as in the federal government, because
Yes.
this is where we get into a lot of semantics issues where I think people sometimes misunderstand me, because I don't think of government as being just one thing. I don't think it's just the federal government. And sometimes when we talk about state, what is the state? We have to ask that. I mean, I think of governments being multi-scale. There are different levels. You could have a government of just a few people. You could have a government of a neighborhood.
Sure.
Now, these governments have different powers. So when people say, well, do you hate government? I mean, we are all involved in governments of some sort. And I know some people will refer to it as governance. I think that the words are basically synonymous. But that's why it's hard to talk about whether you hate the state unless you know what you're referring to. So if you're referring to the federal government, I don't think the federal government has been effective at protecting our rights.
Okay.
I don't think the federal government does what it claims to do. I think it's mostly a show. But if you ask me which one is violating our rights more, the federal government or state governments, that would be actually a tough question to answer. I mean, I think state governments, I served in the state legislature, and the state of Michigan certainly violates my rights in many ways, just as much as the federal government, if not more.
That's a great question, because your governor is, in certain circles, one of the big three villains of the whole lockdowns. Governor Whitmer of Michigan, Andrew Cuomo, who's under a lot of heat right now for what's going on, what's supposedly happened with nursing homes and the cover-up, and Gavin Newsom in California, who's facing a recall. What has been your reaction as a politician, as a citizen of Michigan, to her response, and especially what have you been hearing from your former constituents?
Well, people are. I mean, I've heard people very angry about it. I mean, from constituents on all sides of the from across the political spectrum. It's not just Republicans who are upset about it. Democrats are upset too. Now, she still maintains, if you believe the polling, she still maintains quite a bit of popularity. So there are people who obviously like it as well. But I want to be clear. Like, when I say the state violates our rights, I mean the state of Michigan. I don't think it's just because of the governor. When I served in the state legislature years ago, more than a decade ago, and it was pretty bad at the time. And we've had Republican governors. Of course. So it's not about, and our current legislature is Republican as well. So I think it's broader than just whether you have a particularly bad governor. But the COVID rules about what's going to lock down and how it's going to happen, I think were nonsensical at times, overreaching. I think they ignored science, they ignored logic, they ignored local knowledge, which was a big problem for me. The idea that the governor knows more than a business about how to operate safely, I think is patently absurd. If you're a business owner and you want to keep people safe in your store, you know a lot better than the governor about which pathways to take in the store and how mask usage should happen in the store and which aisles to close down. She was telling people that, and by just edict, by the way, not even
Right.
through some kind of
Committee or something,
legislative process.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's just, every week she'd issue an edict and telling stores to close down certain aisles so that people would come to the store and they want to buy something, but they're told, no, you can't pull that thing off the shelf because that aisle is closed. And the response from the governor was, well, they should just go to a different store that will have that item. As though that was, as though that was some kind of, pro-health policy,
Right.
to send people to more stores,
and spread anything if you're moving.
Let's put people in 2 stores instead of 1 store. That makes a lot of sense. Or this idea where only a certain number of people could enter stores, and they were making, sort of blanket policies based on square footage and stuff. And then you'd have these lines out the door. Right. So instead of people moving more freely in a store according to the plans of the business owner, who might know how to spread people out in a store, you had these big lines developing outside, and then people were in close contact with each other outside. So this stuff was anti-science and just sort of by decree. And it's, I think you should use local knowledge. I think most of the stuff that would have been done during COVID would have been done voluntarily.
Oh, of course.
I think, mask usage, keeping your distance from people. I think most of it would have been done voluntarily anyways. And I'm not sure, based on all the things we've seen, if you look across all the states in the country, I'm not sure we've seen any pattern where you'd say, well, this state did a lot and therefore they got good results, and this state did little and they got bad results. It's all over the map. Like, you have some states that did a lot and have very bad results, and some states that did little and have very good results in terms of what the government was pressing.
One of the things that I've seen in the last year, and as a libertarian, I'm sure you're kind of 2 minds on this issue, is the conservatives changing their opinions on the police. Because they've seen police, I'm sure you probably have seen the footage in Belgium. They're clubbing an old man over the head on horseback. In Canada, they're pulling people out of their homes because there's too many people in their homes. And basically, the police have been willing to enforce, all of these lockdowns, pulling people out of gyms and so on and so forth. What has been your reaction to, and at the same time, they've been willing to stand down when you had these protests that sometimes turned into looting and violence. What has been your response to the police reaction over the past year?
Well, I mean, I've met with police, and sometimes those meetings go well, and sometimes they don't go well. I haven't always had let's say a good relationship with the police unions and when it comes to my elections and when it comes to politics generally. That's not because I'm anti-police. I think police do serve an important function, and many of them go out and serve honorably, and they're doing what they're instructed to do under the law. So, you're asking them to enforce laws, and they have very difficult jobs and very stressful jobs, and they're trying to do that. But there are a lot of other police who are doing things that I think are very destructive and clearly violate constitutional rights. And my opinion is, if you're given orders that violate the Constitution, you shouldn't follow them. If you're a government official, if you're given orders to violate people's rights, you shouldn't do that. You either resign from the job or you do something else, but you don't do things that harm people.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to take a second to talk to you about sheath underwear, and this is something that Justin and I think would both support, because sheath is made by a veteran and it is made by a small independent business owner. And we want to support the underwear that supports us, and that's Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. How does Sheath support you? Well, it's the most comfortable boxer briefs you'll ever wear. I'm in them right now. And the thing about Sheath, which was invented because they spent time in Iraq, is it's got a dual pouch system to keep your boys separate and safe and comfortable. And it's a lot of fun. They've got lots of different colors, lots of different patterns. I'm wearing the camo ones right now, the white camo, which I really like. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. The first time they brought them to the studio, I was like, what the heck is this? And now you can get close to my body by wearing the same underwear I do. Let's get back to the show. I'm going to play devil's advocate for the police, which I never thought I would do. But one of the things which I found most admirable about you as a congressman is whenever you voted for a bill, in the sake of transparency, you went on Twitter and you explained why you were voting for this bill or voting against it. And obviously, if a bill's 1,000 pages, it's going to be cost benefit. You're going to have to do math. There's going to be things you like. There's going to be things you don't like. It's just the nature of the game. And I think people understand that. But what percent of the bills that you voted for do you think would have passed constitutional muster?
Of the ones I voted for?
Yeah. Is it 0?
Well, if I took we would pass constitutional muster?
Yeah.
Well, again, that's a tough question because sometimes you have an underlying law that is unconstitutional.
Sure.
And you have a bill that has constitutional defects, but you have to weigh, is it less unconstitutional?
Right.
So I've always been an incrementalist in that sense. If I think there's an underlying law that is unconstitutional and something will improve it, I will support that improvement. I will support something that makes it less unconstitutional, but the law could still be unconstitutional. So it's hard to say, what percentage exactly. I've probably voted yes about 50% of the time and no about 50% of the time. I would wager that makes me, if not the lowest, close to it in terms of voting yes in all of Congress. But I think it's probably lower than 50% by the end of it. We kept stats in my office, so I could find those for you. But of that 50% where I voted yes, some percentage of it, I don't know what percentage, but maybe a quarter of it was stuff that would still have some constitutional defects, but was an improvement upon the system. Yeah. But what are you supposed to do? If you vote no, you're maintaining some worse,
right?
Some worse law. So you're put in a bind. There's no way to vote perfectly. It's just not possible because all the bills would have to be introduced by me if they're according to my own preferences, right? Yeah. So they'd have to be introduced by me, and I'd have to avoid amendments that make them worse, and so that's not happening. So you make do with what you have. You're given a choice. Your choice is yes or no, and you vote.
One of the things that's been happening here in New York is a congressman, a Representative Kim, a state congressman, has come out against Governor Cuomo and had said that Governor Cuomo got on the phone with him and was really saying, "I'll destroy your life, and you have to release this statement, supporting me," and so on and so forth. Cuomo, of course, denies this, but Mayor de Blasio came forward and said, "Look, we all have these Governor Cuomo stories where he gets on the phone with us with his temper and threats and so on and so forth." Without necessarily naming names, like what techniques do the leadership of the parties have to make sure that congressmen basically toe the line and vote how they're asked to? Because it's not a coincidence that people tend to vote as a big block.
They'll basically blacklist you if you go against the leadership. That largely means the lobbyists stop dealing with you. They're not going to send you a PAC check. They're not going to hold a fundraiser for you. Your committee assignments will be bad, or you'll get pulled. By the end of it, I don't have any committees.
Wow.
Right. I left Congress with no committees. I started with a few committees, and every couple of years I'd lose a committee. So I had it. And again, this is what's ridiculous about it. Like, people talk about, people getting stripped of committees now, and sometimes they're doing pretty outrageous things. And whether or not you agree they should be pulled off their committees, some of the stuff is pretty, outrageous or outlandish or whatever. I was getting kicked off of committees just for not towing the line.
Yeah.
Like I voted with, I didn't vote with Paul Ryan enough, so I get kicked off a committee. So you get punished like that. I wanted to be on the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
And the leadership team knew this. I'm a lawyer. It's something I wanted to serve on. I thought I could be useful there, to the extent committees are useful at all. And And for 10 years, I tried to get on the Judiciary Committee. They never put me on the Judiciary Committee. They'd put other non-lawyers on. They'd put people on who have like no qualifications for it, but would toe the party line.
Yeah.
And they knew they couldn't depend on me. So they'll pull you off committee. They'll pull you off the committees. You won't get the chairmanships. You won't get the money. You have to. Another thing they demand of you is to donate money to the party. And if you don't donate money to the party, you also get screwed on the committees, and in other ways. So they will not invite you to dinners. I'm sure there's other stuff too. Like, you got to remember, I never got into the thick of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of things were being given to members of Congress that would then be dangled as, we'll take this away from you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I totally get you.
I mean, you guys can use your imaginations, but I don't know. Like, I just don't know, because I was never in that position. I didn't get pulled into that world, and it wouldn't surprise me if you get pulled pretty deep into a world that there's like no backing out of.
Yeah, of course. Is it the kind of thing, since you're so young, that you'd be calling your law school buddies, your college buddies, and being like, dude, like Paul Ryan just called me up and was freaking out, and how is this my life now?
Like, I've got close friends. Most of them are my high school friends, actually, my closest friends. And we talk about things all the time, but I don't know, like, it was what I expected. And they all kind of expected it too. So I never, it never was something that was a surprise to me that these guys act like this. And I think most of the people around me are not surprised either. Okay. I'm fortunately a person who had a very good family and friend network. Like, people around me who really support me and really care about what I'm doing and are behind me 100%. And I think that makes a huge difference in my life. And I think it's incredibly important if you want to be principled in politics. If you want to do the right thing, I think it's incredibly important to have people surrounding you who are supportive, who stand with you. They don't necessarily agree with you on every vote or every issue, but they're there for you and they kind of understand what you're going through.
Let's talk about being a family man. I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen this, but Rand Paul's wife, I'm blanking on her name, she tweeted recently to Kelly. She tweeted recently to Jack Dorsey about, people have been threatening my husband, Senator Rand Paul, who's assaulted by his neighbor and, had to go to the hospital, with injury all the time, and you don't care. Like, as everyone in politics, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, there are going to be people out there who absolutely hate you, who have been trained to think that you're the devil. And God forbid you see things like Rand Paul, you see things like Steve Scalise, and these are how much did that affect your day-to-day existence, knowing that there's people like that out there?
That there are people who want to do harm and all that. Yeah. It not really doesn't affect me. You go into this job knowing that there are going to be people like that out there, and I just try not to think about it. When you're going out, if you want to do this job well, I think you can't think about it that much.
Okay.
I've got to go out and I've got to meet people, shake hands, go to events, hold town halls, walk in parades, and I'm going to run into all sorts of people. And the reality of life is, if people want to do you harm, they can.
Yeah.
They just can. And so the reason more harm is not done is not because of security measures. It's because people don't want to. Like, there aren't enough people. I mean, I don't mean that there aren't people out there who would like to do it. It takes a combination of wanting to do something and planning, and actually a lot of people just aren't that, they're just not, there aren't that many people who will take that step. So you can't worry about it. If it happens, that's how life works. And it's unfortunate. It's sad, but I don't think you can get like immersed in it. It changes who you are.
Yeah. Were you friends with Congressman Scalise, and how did you find out about what had happened to him, and what was your reaction?
Well, I know Steve. We weren't close friends. We were acquaintances. Actually, on the leadership team. He was one of the ones who was, I think, a kinder person in terms of personal interactions. You know, a lot of the other guys were very heavy-handed. I think he took a lighter touch with most people, and people appreciate that about him. But yeah, no, I was horrified when I heard about that, and like I said, there's no way to stop all that. You take whatever precautions you can, and you do the best you can in life. But and
He's breaking up.
to you, there's risk to me. There's risk to all sorts of people in high profile positions, and so you do the best you can, and you move on.
You have been very consistent and strong in your criticism of President Trump, both with the first impeachment and what happened on January 6th. As someone who regards politics as corrupt, and especially Washington as corrupt, do you not see any upside in the sense of Congress being, in effect, clowned and being made a mockery of, either by his actions or by the people who stormed the Capitol?
Well, I don't think there's an upside to people storming the Capitol. I mean, I think liberty depends on a good deal of societal trust, and when you have a breakdown in institutions or just a breakdown in people's comfort with each other, what you typically get is bigger government, more centralized government. You rarely see in the world a place where you have high levels of trust and the government keeps growing. Usually, the higher the level of trust, the more people are willing to work things out voluntarily. Usually, if the trust goes down, if people think that their neighbors are up to no good, or people might be a threat to them, that's when people want some strong man, someone
Right.
to protect them. And almost all strongmen or authoritarian regimes, and I can say this, my mom is Syrian,
Oh, yeah.
so we're familiar with this. Almost all strongmen, they rely on a bit of sort of populist angst, like there's some other group who are dangerous, and I need to protect you from them. So I don't see a lot of upside to that. I do think, I mean, there are lessons to be learned from Trump becoming president. I don't think it's a good thing that Congress is weaker today than it's ever been. I don't think that's a positive thing for a constitutional republic. But yeah, there are lessons to it. I mean, there are at least campaign lessons from it.
What was your reaction to the whole Brett Kavanaugh nomination, and how that played out?
Well, look, I'm not I sort of I was never a fan of Brett Kavanaugh for more jurisprudence reasons. So
Can you explain that? What about him did you have issues with?
Well, I think that he's not, when you're looking for a libertarian jurist like I am, someone who I think is going to protect our rights, uphold the Fourth Amendment, which was a big one for me. He just didn't fit the bill. Like, we had enough judicial history from him that we knew he wasn't going to be a strong defender of rights. So I was never a big fan of his. On the other hand, you have, when you have accusations made, you got to back them up. And I think that's critically important. I don't think there was enough evidence, and that the biggest thing about the Brett Kavanaugh hearing, from my perspective, is that it took Republicans from being just okay with Trump and accepting of Trump to being big supporters of Trump. Like, I'd say until that hearing, there were more Republicans who were like, I voted for Trump and I just put up with him, and hopefully he'll go away someday and we'll be all good. And after that hearing, I feel like the Republicans were more gung-ho about Trump and said, we need this guy. We're fighting a war here, as they would frame it. And we have to have someone like Trump, some kind of like Republican strongman to fight back.
Do you think they're wrong?
To me, that's the biggest thing that came from it.
But are they wrong?
Yeah, I think they're wrong. And I know that like this runs counter to a lot of conservatives and many libertarians who think that the path forward is some kind of war with the left. That I don't mean a real war. I mean like some kind of electoral war or
cultural,
cultural war. So just to be clear for those listening, not a real war. But I don't think that cultural wars or political wars like that, where people on the other side of the aisle become your enemies, are conducive to liberty. I mean, we talked about this a little earlier. I think that there's no such thing as liberty that arises out of people hating each other. It just doesn't happen. And what I think the era of Trump brought more than ever before, and I don't pin this all on Donald Trump. I think he's a symptom of it. I think he helped exacerbate it. But this animosity toward people who are not politically aligned, I don't think is a good thing for our country. I think it will hurt our country, and it makes liberty less likely. So that's why I put a lot of weight in that stuff. I think that a lot of people don't understand why that concerns me so much. But look, I'm a Hayek libertarian, and I'm a believer that we have to have a lot of social bonds and trust in order for libertarianism to work. Because if you don't have that, people are going to reject liberty. They're going for the strong man.
Hey guys, want to talk to you about Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX. They're these blue light glasses. So you're sitting at home, you're looking at a computer screen all day, you're going to get the headaches, you're going to get exhausted, but you can't fall asleep. It's really annoying. You've all been there. I told you have. So if you spend all day looking at screens like a blue-pilled person, Blue Blocks is here to help. These are blue light glasses that block the blue light coming off your screens that cause eye strain. For every pair you buy, Blue Blocks donates a pair of reading glasses to someone in need. So if you go to blueblocks.com/you'rewelcome or enter code WELCOME at checkout, you get 15% off and you get free shipping worldwide. It's BLUBLOX.com. They've got a lot of different styles to choose from. They've got reading glasses, everything you need. And it'll help you be able to relax. It'll help you not have headaches and eye strains. These are scientifically proven. If you go to blueblocks.com/you'rewelcome or just remember promo code WELCOME, you'll be thanking me for 15% off. Let's get back to the show. And they're also they're going to want the welfare state, because if people aren't taking care of each other, no one wants to see anyone starving in the street. So if you don't have private charity, if you don't have neighborhoods looking after one another, it's going to have to be the state to step in, or you're going to see children starving in the street. And that's not an option for the vast majority of people, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum. We're not having that. Yeah. So if it has to be welfare, I don't care. Get the kids fed and get them educated.
That's right. I think the more you have animosity and contempt for people who don't agree with you, the more you take an ends justifies the means approach, where you think about people as ends, as means rather than ends. In other words, you look at a person and you decide they're an additional vote to help you get where you're going, and not as a human being. I don't think that stuff is good for liberty. That's why I'm more so than other people. I think in libertarian politics, I've been concerned about that.
You earlier talked about how people aren't really politicians and Washington congressmen aren't as concerned about policy as they are about ego. How does that reconcile with this thing you hear very frequently, that partisan tensions are at an all-time high and that the Republicans and the Democrats, genuinely hate each other?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure they're incompatible Why do you think they're incompatible?
Well, I mean,
Or, I don't know if you do.
I'm not saying that. I'm sure it's a huge Venn diagram. I'm just asking you from your experience. The question is, am I hating someone from the other party because they have the wrong letter in front of their name, or am I just hating them because they're getting in the way of me getting in front of that camera and me becoming a big shot?
I mean,
how much communication is there between the two parties? Like, were you ever sitting? Did you have any friends among the Democrats? Was that discouraged?
Yeah, sure.
That's what I'm asking.
No. Okay. I mean, I don't know if you're going down this thread, but a lot of that is just it's theater.
Okay.
Right. The Republicans and Democrats don't really hate each other.
Okay.
Yeah. Like you'll see you'll be at a committee hearing, and these people will be yelling at each other, and then the cameras go off, and they'll go and they'll go and you say, "Hey, that was good. That was great." It was like, I mean, it really is.
That's like wrestling.
It's so much. Yeah, it's so much more of a performance than people at home realize. It really is scripted, like literally committee hearings, the high profile ones. When you watch one of these big committee hearings that like CNN or Fox News is covering, they say we're going to have a committee hearing. Those things are literally scripted. Like you are handed a script the day before and told to read this script and not to stray from it. And and so it created a lot of problems for me when I was on a committee because I wouldn't read their script. So I was like, I'm not reading your script. I remember they brought Michael Cohen in and they wanted us to follow a script. I said I wasn't going to follow the script. And so even though I was the second highest ranking Republican, they moved me down the line. They were like, wow. We're going to put you like, after a dozen people talk, we're going to let you talk because we don't want you essentially ruining our performance. Yeah. We've got like this, right. So the stuff is very scripted, very theatrical. They don't hate each other. Some of them are friends. They'll go on Twitter and say the worst things about each other, or on TV. They'll go on Fox News and say, if so-and-so had his way, blah, blah, blah. And they just rip into the guy. And then they'll go have dinner or whatever. It's not what people think. And I'm not saying that they're all best friends or anything.
Sure.
But there is, and I'm not saying that they're all like this, but there is a high level of theatrics to it. Because when you look at Congress, there are those performers who make up some percentage of, let's say, 20% or something of Congress who are really like, they're on TV all the time. They're performing it. Most members of Congress are not well known. Most members of Congress are just in the background. They'll read the script. They'll go to the committee hearing. They'll read the script, but they're not in it for the they're not in it to be entertainers in the sense of like, they think they can make a career out of entertainment. There are obviously members of Congress who can make a career out of entertainment.
Sure.
There are others who can't. They just don't have the skills. They're in it because it's a good gig. They get paid well and they don't really have to think. So they follow the script. They do what they're told, and the paycheck comes in and they get reelected. So you've got sort of those two groups. And then there's the smallest group are the ones who really care about what's going on, who care about policy, who read the bills, and that group is almost inconsequential.
One of the best things I imagine about being a congressman is that you'll get someone who's down on their luck, who's really kind of being screwed, and you're in a position to just with a few phone calls really make a positive, profound difference. And that really kind of helps lives and saves lives. And that's something that I think, you're going to put the press releases out, but you still did it. And you really kind of did make a positive difference. Can you think of some examples of this that you were proudest of?
Well, I mean, without getting into like naming, names, because there are a lot of things that were fulfilling to me as a congressman that the public never sees. And they are the most meaningful part of being a congressman. For example, at least for me, speaking to students was very meaningful to me.
Yeah.
I knew I could make a difference in their lives just by spending some time in their classroom, or they'd come to DC and visit. And I always made an effort to do that, to spend as much time with students as possible. answer all their questions, encourage them to be independent-minded. But you'd also have constituents who would sometimes message me, like DM me, and they're down. You know, I've had constituents who are at times suicidal, or you know, who they didn't know who to reach out to, and they reach out to their congressman. You know, and they do it they know that I'm on Twitter, and they say, like, I am going to reach out to him, and I feel like I've helped people at times get through some tough times, and that's been meaningful to me. And there are lots of constituents where I still, like, you know, will message. I don't really know them all that well personally. Sure. Like, we're in the real world. We're not like hanging out.
Yeah.
But they feel they can reach out to me for help and for guidance. And I try to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, I've had that happen myself. And, you know, a lot of people just are desperate to be heard. And it really is just a matter of a 5-minute conversation of just saying, hang in there. I see you. And, you know, you matter to me. And I don't have to pass a bill. I'm just telling you, you're making a mistake. Go to sleep, relax, you'll be better tomorrow. And just having that from somebody else, even if it's just a stranger because they have a blue check or whatever, it really does often have a big difference. And it is very kind of humbling, moving, I don't know what word it is, that I'm just some jerk behind a microphone. You're someone who just got elected, that you have that ability with a few words to make that big difference. It gets to you in a very positive way. Okay, I think. Okay, so let me ask you this: is there anything that
you're back? Yeah, we cut off.
Okay. I was being very poignant, and then you're sitting there.
I know you were making the most dramatic point, but I'll say this: I didn't take it for granted that the words I would say would make a difference in people's lives. You know, for whatever reason, you know, I'm just a guy, just like you are. People look up to us in sometimes same ways, sometimes different ways, but they look up to us and we can make a difference. And I think that you shouldn't take that for granted. And when you can try to help someone, you should. And I think that it's meaningful to them that someone who they think is important was willing to listen to them.
One of the people that you're often associated with, to some extent, is Tulsi Gabbard, also, who just recently left Congress. She got a lot of heat for meeting with Assad. You're of Syrian descent. What do you think of her as a person, and do you think she did the right thing by taking that meeting?
I mean, I don't want to speak for whether she did the right thing. I would say I would not meet with him. Okay. But, you know, like, I don't know all the circumstances, and in fairness, people meet with bad characters all the time. I mean, this is part of foreign policy. Yeah, I certainly didn't object when Trump tried to make overtures to North Korea. Yeah. I think that it wasn't successful the way we would have liked in most respects, but I don't object to that kind of, you know, Russia in different ways. I don't think that stuff is harmful. I think it's the context matters. So I would say she has an independent streak, and that independent streak matters in politics. It's very rare that you see that kind of thing. Someone who's willing to stand up to their own party. Yeah. And to me, that's meaningful and rare.
She was completely, basically written out of existence by the corporate media. I had a tweet thread when Kamala Harris dropped out of the White House race, and all of these articles, CNN, I don't remember the outlets, none of them, they had like a list of why Kamala Harris dropped out of the race for president, and none of these articles mentioned Tulsi's like murdering of her during the debates. They like pretended it didn't happen. And that to me was one example of it, just the shamelessness of corporate media. It'd be one thing to have a bias and be like, this happened, but it wasn't a big deal for X, Y, and Z reasons. But to literally pretend it wasn't one of the reasons, I thought was absolutely shocking. What was your reaction when you watched that debate performance?
Oh, well, I mean, I loved it. So,
okay.
I love anytime someone can take a dig at, a really cutting dig at Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton or someone who's been elevated by the media as some kind of hero when the kind of things they've done are horrific.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great. I mean, it happens on the right too. Some people are lauded as some kinds of heroes when they're in many respects. I don't want to say that they're horrible people. I would say that they've done horrible things. Yeah. And we should applaud people exposing that kind of stuff. And they're welcome to debate it and fight back and say, no, I'm not that horrible because of X, I didn't, or this is the context. I think that's a good thing. So look, Tulsi was written out of existence because she was a threat to the system.
Yeah.
And a threat to the Democratic establishment. And, they've basically made her persona non grata. That's that. They didn't, it wasn't, they used the Assad stuff was just a pretext, right? Oh, she met with Assad, so therefore that's why she's bad. That's not the reason. Like if Hillary Clinton had met with Assad, they'd say nothing about it. It's because of the other stuff.
Hey guys, today we're welcoming back IPVanish to the show. What is IPVanish? It's a virtual private network, VPN for you boomers. It's a super important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You could use it on your computer, your tablet, your phone, everything. When you use a VPN, your data is encrypted. It's important because what you're doing on the internet isn't my business and it's no one else's business either. IPVanish helps you remain anonymous and secure on the internet, which is something we could all use. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice, you could get 65% off. It's just $3.49 a month or $28 a year. Here's what you get with IPVanish. Anonymous IP addresses. Your personal IP address can't be tracked. Circumvent any online censorship. Get protection when using public Wi-Fi. And 24/7 support. Email them, chat with them, call them. They're there to help. And you're getting 65% off. Not too shabby. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice, you can claim your 65% off savings. Show these guys some love. They're repeat sponsors. And remember, it's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online today. Let's get back to the show.
You and I remember very vividly in 2008 how much the anti-war movement helped propel Barack Obama into office, how much this was used as a cudgel against John McCain. You're another George W. Bush. And then cut to a decade later, this whole anti-war fervor within the Democratic Party, which Tulsi represented, seemed to have vanished. Are you surprised to what extent that issue went away on the left, which is historically their bailiwick?
Not really. I mean, when I entered Congress in 2011, I would say that most of the Democrats were not really anti-war. Neither were most of the Republicans. It's always been, at least within Congress, a small group on the right and left who are anti-war. And so it didn't really surprise me. I think that with Trump in the White House, that issue sort of went into the background. I mean, nobody's talking about the war. And it's kind of like, Trump didn't really end any wars, and he expanded several of them. But because he used rhetoric that seemed anti-war, it caused the Democratic establishment to go the other way just to be opposed to him. Well, if he's saying we should bring back the troops, then we should say we're for the troops staying there because, Trump, whatever Trump says is bad, right? So I think that helped push the left in a direction that was not good, but it's not like they went from being really anti-war, right. I think, at least in the past 10 years, to being, pro-war. I think it's a shift around, it's a marginal shift.
You're one vote out of 435. When you're talking about war, this is something that it's not like marginal tax rates. This is people dying. This is kids getting killed necessarily. This is, women becoming widows at a young age. It's just absolutely horrific. Are there any bills that you were opposed to during your tenure as Congress where you were like, I can't believe this is passing. This is really going to do like real serious harm to people, and people just voting for it, and just this kind of sense that I can't believe this is happening.
Well, I mean, a lot of bills were like that. So I think that our spending bills were frequently like that, filled with stuff that nobody read. But what tended to get me charged up, because mostly, like, war is a big issue for me, but mostly we aren't dealing with war bills, because war is sort of on autopilot, right? They at some point, Congress developed this consensus that you don't need Congress to be involved in war. There are a few of us who believed, Congress has to make these decisions as representatives of the people, but the vast majority of Congress, driven largely by leaders, the leadership team's perspective on this, on both sides of the aisle, is that you don't need Congress involved in war. The president just makes those decisions. So there weren't too many bills like that. I would say that the constant renewal of the Patriot Act and FISA, that was stuff that would drive me crazy. Especially the most recent FISA 702 renewal. That one, because a lot of people don't know the backstory of that. I mean, like, FISA 702 was up for renewal, and the Trump administration was pushing for its renewal, pushing very strongly. And I was fighting it, and I was largely alone in that fight. We had a few others who were fighting it, but it wasn't a big group who were fighting back in Congress. And the Trump administration actually threatened my amendment. I had an amendment to try to stop the renewal and to vastly, modify 702, the way it would operate. And the administration issued a veto threat. So I was there fighting in conference, the Republican conference. I'd stand up. It would be Devin Nunes would stand up, and he'd give the argument for FISA 702. The same guy who's now out there, claiming fame on opposing FISA and all the spying on the president and all that. But at least the allegations. So his claim to fame is, he's standing up for our rights and privacy, and because he can't believe the president had this and that done to him, and this campaign had this and that done. This same guy stood up in our Republican conference and pushed for FISA 702 renewal. And I was standing up in conference and pushing back against it. And so that was actually, during the Trump era, that was one of the few times where we actually did have some internal debate within the Republican Party on an issue, and I was able to take the lead on that and offer an amendment. And of course, all these guys were hitting me hard and pushing back and saying what I was doing was awful, and there were already enough protections in FISA, etc. And then a week later, within 1 week, they all come out about Trump being spied on, according to them, Trump being spied on under FISA. So they renew it, and then they argue against it.
Yeah.
And that to me is the essence of the theater, right? That really shows how much of it is just fake. These guys came and they pushed for a FISA renewal because, I don't know, it might have to do with some kind of intel issue or Defense Department officials or whoever it might be pushing them on this stuff, or corporate lobbyists or whoever it might be. They're pushing for its renewal. And then a week later, they're saying, can you believe how FISA was abused? and I have to sit there. And then the funniest part about it is then I get attacked because I want to see all the evidence on FISA abuse, right? I want to see, okay, someone says the Trump campaign was spied on. I want to see the evidence. I'm not this kind of guy who's going to be like, Devin Nunes alleges it, so so therefore it's true. So then I get accused of being pro-FISA, and Nunes gets treated as some kind of hero on FISA when he had just been fighting me a week earlier on FISA 702 renewal. So this is the world I was living in Congress, and that was one example of something that was really frustrating, and to this day frustrates me, because if you ask people now, like if you ask people in the Republican Party, who's a hero on opposing FISA, Nunes or Amash, you took a poll, the Republicans would all say oh, Nunes for sure.
Amash isn't even a Republican.
Nunes, right. Right. But Nunes is the one who is pushing it, and I was the one fighting it. And this is true on the Patriot Act and all. And Trump himself renewed FISA 702, and he renewed the Patriot Act. At least the first renewal. The second one never got across the finish line. But that was mostly because I think the Senate saved him.
Which of these people would you have wanted President Trump to pardon? Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, and Ross Ulbricht?
All three.
Okay.
Now with Ross, maybe some kind of
commutation,
lessening of the sentence. Okay, yeah. I don't know that I'd give a full pardon there, but only because there were clearly laws that seemed to have been broken, and it's just that I think that the punishment was excessive.
Yeah, he's in solitary for life.
Look, yeah, I mean, with Snowden, you can make some argument laws were broken, but I think there are some serious constitutional issues there that make a pardon worthwhile.
And what about Assange?
Well, I think that that punishing him for essentially free speech activities would be extremely detrimental to speech and journalism. So that's my concern there. It has nothing to do with like, do I think any of these guys are good people or whatever? I don't know them personally, right?
Right, of course.
I don't know them personally, and I can't vouch for that. But I do think that what we do in terms of sentencing and in terms of our justice system has an impact on other people. And I don't want, like in Snowden's case, I don't want it to be the case that someone who knows that the government is doing something unconstitutional feels like they're going to get some kind of life sentence or something very serious, some serious sentence because they exposed it. In Assange's case, I don't want journalists and other speakers to feel like they can't write about stuff that is horrendous. And in Ulbricht's case, I think that we can't have sentences where people are, I don't know, it's like a double life sentence for crimes that are arguably not as serious as many other crimes out there, and where people might get, 5 years or 10 years.
Do you miss anything about Washington?
Yeah, I miss my staff.
Okay.
I worked with with a great staff, and that was the hardest thing by far, leaving those staff. And I had a very, my staff was like a family. Like we were very close people. And I would say I probably had the lowest turnover in all of Congress. Like people who started working for me a decade ago were still with me. And there were some new ones who came along the way who were fantastic additions, but we're all like a family and we're still close. And you don't really have situations where staff leave my office and are upset. They all actually are very close and stay in contact. And I've even had staff leave and come back. So it's a close-knit family, and that was very hard. That was, to me, the most difficult part. I have a few friends, obviously, like Thomas Massie, who I miss, but it's not the same as missing my staff.
You never went full Amy Klobuchar on them?
I mean, I don't know. What's the context there?
Oh, she got yelled at by Harry Reid because she was throwing staplers at her staff.
Yeah. I remember that.
Sending emails in all caps in the middle of the night about, blah, blah, blah. So she had to get a sit down.
No, my staff were treated respectfully and treated kindly. I don't think you get good. I mean, look, each person is different, sure, and different. There are different ways to motivate different people. But as a general rule, I don't think berating people and humiliating people is a good way to get good work out of them.
I think that's fair to say, yes. Justin, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Okay. I knew this question was coming, and still, they
should have given you a script.
Okay, my favorite part was before the interview, where I had to spend 15 minutes figuring out how to make my microphone work with this program, because it was pretty embarrassing. But we figured it out,
And it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, the funniest part is it was just it was just a matter of restarting the browser, and it worked. But so something didn't work the first time. But I liked the whole thing. It was fun.
Okay,
I had a good time. I'm happy to come back on anytime.
You are welcome.